Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight on COS Indiana Live. My name is Dale Parrish. I'm the virtual program coordinator for Convention of States here in Indiana. And joining me this evening is my co-host, Mr. Ken Kashuba. Hello, Ken.
Hello, Dale. How are you?
Fine, fine. I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit. I didn't hear you very well. There we go.
Right.
Well, we had a little bit of a scare before starting tonight, but one of our guests had a little technology issue, but we got it straightened out. Thank goodness! Right at the very end.
Yeah, computer connections. You never know when they're going to work or when they're not. So
that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Ken will be monitoring the viewer comments and questions. So if you are a viewer tonight through Facebook or our YouTube channel, feel free to drop us a comment or a question, and Ken will make sure that we address that if it's applicable. And so that's one of the things that Ken will be doing tonight. So, Ken, this is broadcast number 242.
wow.
Yeah, and you've been on board for 106. How about that, huh?
Yeah, I'm feeling older all the time, Dale.
Well, we're closing in on that 250 mark, so we're gonna try and do something special on that night. That'll be a roundtable in June, so planning on doing something special that evening. Ken, I want to announce something tonight. You didn't know I was going to do this, but folks, we track the number of views that we get on COS Indiana Live through YouTube, Facebook, as well as a number of other social media platforms. And our record up until April was 29,600 views for a month. I can't remember which month that was, Ken. Might have been January. I can't remember for sure. But I just checked before coming on tonight, and for the month of April, and we even got one more day left in the month of April, we're at 32,498. So
Great.
that is a brand new record for us. And
Yep.
That's really great, isn't it? That's
Good to
really
see. Good to see. Yeah, good to see. And we need some fireworks or something to go off here on those types of announcements.
Well, maybe our guest tonight will get us over that hump, and
Gonna push us over the top. Yep.
We've kind of set internally. We've kind of set a goal to hit 40,000 on some month. I think that's well within reach, Ken, and maybe one that we can go way beyond. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that in. So
you don't want to put any extra pressure on our guest tonight, but I think we could do it.
Okay. All right. Well, Ken, give us a little brief, if you would, explanation as to the QR code and what's involved in that.
Sure. That QR code right about there is the way to subscribe to COS Indiana Live. A subscription is going to give you access to our platform, whereby we have plenty of informative information. We have some video and other types of entertaining interviews and messages that are available to those who subscribe. And by subscribing, you also just give us a support level that we can use. Just like the numbers we showed you tonight, we look to be able to show a subscription list that is growing. So the QR code, you can use your smartphone to capture that. It's going to ask for your name and an email address, and you'll get information and about how to sign in and get yourself registered up to be a part of our subscription list. So use that. It'll be available throughout the program, and it'll also work when it's if you're viewing this as a recorded version.
Good deal. Good deal. Yes, and our subscriber list is growing, and that's a good thing. So
Correct.
All right, Ken, I want to something that we have tried to do on every broadcast every week is take a quick look at the debt trap. This is one of the pillars of the COS resolution is to propose amendments, amendments that would deal with the national debt. And so, as just a reminder to all of us, how critical this is, every week on our broadcast, we want to take a quick look at the U.S. debt clock. And if you'll see right here in the upper left-hand corner of that, I'll give it a little bigger screen here. But up in that left-hand corner there, the national debt's almost $35 trillion. And you can see the numbers are continuously going up second by second. I think we figured about every 30 seconds it went up $1 million.
Well, you know what I just did, Dale? I just screenshot that with my phone.
Okay.
And I think next time we come on, we'll screenshot the next one, and we'll look at the difference in just a week makes.
Okay, good deal. That's
now,
a good
quiz or a little test. We'll do a little test.
You know, we talked about maybe getting a little window up here next to the QR code.
Yeah,
to have a corner of that, and we'll talk about that. But
yeah.
Okay, I like that idea. Good idea. Good idea. All right. Well, Ken, I think it's time for us to get to our first guest this evening, and I think you're going to I think everyone's going to enjoy this. This gentleman is heads up our mentoring department in Convention of States, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing what he does because he plays a very important role in our organization. So let's bring on our first guest, Mr. Chris Thomas. Hello, Chris.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Good to see and hear you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very good to hear you. So very good to be on. Thanks for having me on.
That's what we were. That was our technology issue as we were getting ready to come on tonight. You could hear us. You could hear us, but we couldn't hear you, or something like that.
Opposite. I couldn't hear you guys, but you could hear me. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. Is that it?
I guess you could have pantomimed questions to me, and it still would have been okay. So.
I guess so. All right. Well, listen, Chris. Let's start with tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, a little bit of your background.
Sure. So I'm from originally Northern California, was born and raised in the Bay Area, then Sacramento, California. And when I graduated high school, felt a calling to go into ministry and started off in youth ministry. Worked in various different youth ministry roles throughout my undergraduate. Then after I graduated with my bachelor's from a Bible college in Northern California, that's now named William Jessup University. It was different when I was there. And it used to be San Jose Christian College. And then I left youth ministry to go to seminary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and studied to get my master's of divinity, and then got ordained and served two churches.
Went clear to the other end of the country to go to seminary, right?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of folks will ask the question, you left California to come to the Midwest, but we know that California isn't the dreamland that everybody makes it out to be. And it's tougher and tougher, especially for young families, to get by and to be able to buy a house and just have a little bit of flexibility financially and everything because of California's policy.
Yeah.
So at an early age, I started listening to conservative talk radio, got involved in the Tea Party when I was a youth minister in Santa Barbara. Knew who Mark Meckler was even from that because he was a fellow Californian and was leading some of the Tea Party stuff. But
that's right.
After the Tea Party fizzled out, I didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. I didn't really know that he had left the National Tea Party Patriots, founded Citizens for Self-Governance, and that then they had launched Convention of States Project. So I was serving as a pastor, and I served in two different congregations here in Michigan as an associate pastor, then as a senior pastor for a little over 10 years. And just burned out pretty badly. Had some family tragedies happen in my my immediate family, not my family, but my mom and dad and my brother, and so kind of took a step back. Didn't know if I was going to go back to the church or not. But a mentor of mine was actually mentoring Mark Meckler and Mike Ruthenberg at the time through a series of spiritual formation guides that he wrote, partially as a outcome of a doctorate of ministry that he did with a guy named Dallas Willard at Fuller Seminary in Southern California. So that kind of got my foot in the door with Convention Estates, and that's how I even heard of Convention Estates in the first place and came to COS, and started off part-time, mainly doing with the focus of doing discipleship, mentorship with men through that same spiritual formation series, and then fell in love with servant leadership. And they asked if I would come on full-time to help develop this new department that was coming up, that Jenny Rapini had started, the mentoring department. And so I said yes. And I started part-time April 2021, and I started full-time September 2021.
So as far as getting into Convention Estates, was it basically through Mark then, Mark Meckler and is it Mike Ruthenberg?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, it was more through Jenny Rapini, because Jenny Rapini knew my mentor, Carlo Wolf. And she had actually kind of been mentored by Carlo. They were good friends, and she had gone through the same spiritual formation series that Mark and Mike were going through. In fact, because she had gone through them and experienced a pretty deep transformation of her own spiritual life, she started using it with other women within COS who were interested in going deeper in their spiritual lives, just as a kind of volunteer thing. And then that's how Mike and Mark heard about it and got interested and wanted to go through it. And so then they got hooked up with my mentor. So they kind of dreamed up the idea of hiring some folks who could do that kind of mentorship for anybody who was hungry for it within COS. And they hired myself and Rosalind Weisenberger, who is the a mentor associate in the mentoring department at COS. And she's also full-time now. She started part-time a month before me, and she went full-time this last year.
So you created the mentoring department in Convention Estates, or did Jeannie pretty well start that?
Jenny pretty much started it. I mean, okay. Jenny was the amazing innovator that really put together a lot of our grassroots department, and then even recognized leadership capabilities of Jason Gerard and mentored him, and so that he could become the director of the grassroots department. And then she kind of shifted over at that time, and she started focusing on servant leadership and spiritual mentoring. And that's how the mentoring department got started. And so we were a pretty tight team between Jenny and Rosalind, and Jackie Burns has joined our team too. And we run it Jackie fairly Burns. As co-leaders. Yeah.
Yeah. Jenny's one of the, I guess I would consider her one of the originals that actually started Convention Estates, along with Mark Meckler and some others. But yeah, she's one of the original ones.
She was actually a volunteer. Some people maybe don't know this, but she was actually a volunteer early on in the Tea Party, and then took on some fairly significant roles within various different Tea Party organizations coming out of Northern California. Right. And that's how her and Mark really became good friends. And Jenny helped launch dozens, I don't know the exact number, but dozens of other Tea Party organizations and movements across the U.S. as that movement spread. And then after she left the Tea Party Patriots and volunteering with them, Mark and Mike had already started Citizens for Self-Governance, and were getting Convention Estates as their main project going. And so she came over and started helping them to develop the grassroots material and training and leadership stuff.
Okay.
At least that's how I understand it. If I get any of that wrong, then anybody who knows better than me. I wasn't there, but.
Well, I'll believe you. Ken, do you believe him?
Yeah. Hey, it's a tightly woven ship, but yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. Well, then tell us, Chris, the mentoring department. What is your mission? What is this department trying to do then, as a mentoring department?
Pretty quickly when I joined COS, I was never really much of a political guy. I didn't have a lot of hope in American politics. I was usually fairly cynical about American politics. Never had even registered as a Democrat or a Republican. Was just always independent. Usually voted conservative, independent, but I didn't really have a mindset that I was going to work in politics. In fact, whenever somebody asks me what I'm doing now, who knows me, it's very hard for me to try to tell them what I do, because it's just such a unique job. But I fell in love with COS really quickly. One of the things that I fell in love with was the culture of servant leadership. When I took servant leadership from Jenny and then started co-teaching it with her, and then eventually started teaching my own classes, I gained so much wisdom from that book. And in fact, actually, I think it made me 100-fold better leader, just diving into that material and really starting to absorb it and learn it and then put it into practice in my own life. And that's coming from a guy who had an undergraduate and graduate degree in ministry and had read probably 24 or more leadership books and had really been intentional. I've been to leadership conferences and things, and yet that book was just a really important set of principles that kind of pulled together a cohesive way of living in a servant attitude. And that began to make me realize that COS's mission is really special. It's something that's really unique. And I was asked to actually share a little bit of a vision to where we can bring the mentoring department at the staff retreat that we had that first year I came on. And I kind of looked at what we were doing in COS. And the unique thing that I think we're doing as a political organization versus any other organization is that our mission is aimed at the real seat of power in American politics, and that is the hearts of the American people. We are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we believe in the principle of self-governance. And so we want people to be self-governing and engaged and involved, citizen activists in the American political landscape without becoming politicians themselves, being citizen activists. And I think that's a powerful mission. It's something that is very, very unique, because if the transformation can truly happen, it'll be long lasting, because it'll be a cultural transformation that happens in the hearts of our people. So I really believe in our mission statement as an organization. And we started thinking, as we were developing the mentoring department, how are we going to serve this? So we actually wrote our own mission statement. The COS mentoring department cultivates the organization's core values and our culture of self-governance. We aim to inspire a political and spiritual awakening, which is our aspirational goal as an organization in America, by teaching servant leadership, developing emerging leaders, mentoring team members in spiritual transformation, and fostering meaningful spiritual fellowship through study of God's word and prayer. And so that is really the impetus behind what we do in the mentoring department. And again, the whole mentoring department came up through demand. It wasn't something that the top tried to force it down. It was people were wanting to take servant leadership courses after they were hearing about other people taking it and hearing about how it was impacting their lives, much like it did mine. And they were hearing about spiritual experiences people were having in mentorship with Jenny and then myself and Rosalind. And so they asked, can I join the Bible study? Can I join a group that's going through that shawl series that I hear about? And so it really came from an expressed desire and need from our very grassroots and our international team.
I think, Convention of States does have a set of core values, and those are published. As a matter of fact, I keep those right handy here, right on my desk, as a matter of fact. And we have a gentleman in our organization here in Indiana that is going in the process of creating a series of recordings pertaining to our core values, as well as some other basic things in Convention of States. And I consider these core values as a COS basic. I call them a COS basic, something that we should always come back to and remind ourselves of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're all about. So and certainly self-governance is all part of that as well. So I think that's really good. It's all part of leadership development in convention of states. As a matter of fact, a concept that you spoke of before, spiritual political awakening. I believe that's where the core values come into play. How's it going? Ken and I have both been through one of the courses, servant leadership, and we'll talk a little bit about that very shortly here. But how's the program coming? How's it coming along?
I think it's coming along very, very well, and it's been embraced by our grassroots very strongly, servant leadership especially, but even some of the stuff that we're doing that's a bit more intensive has been embraced pretty strongly by our grassroots and has blown me away. We really believe, and this is a part of COS's story. Early on, as COS was attempting to call a convention of states, they realized that that was a vision that was too small. That first of all, it wouldn't really fix the country because the hearts of the American people were the true place of power in American politics and needed to be restored as the true place. So that's where the mission about growing the grassroots army came. But they also realized that having a finite goal or purpose that is accomplishable is also not really effective at helping us to continue to be in a powerful force in American landscape for many decades to come. And so they needed something that was more transcendent than that. We actually teach that in servant leadership. We teach that you should have goals, or what we call theirs, in your life, that you should be aware where you currently are. You're here, and then you should be being strategic, thinking about how do we get from here to there. But there's another concept called a transcendent there, and you want to have a transcendent there because this is kind of like your true north, or maybe a north star. It's something that you navigate your life by, and all of your other theirs, any other goal that's worth pursuing, will be one that puts you in line with going the right direction, the direction that's your overarching purpose. And that's really what our aspirational goal is for COS. The spiritual and political awakening is that kind of transcendent goal. And that was recognized as necessary early on, partially because we knew we needed something bigger than just a convention to call, as powerful of a tool as that is. But also because we realized that all other important kind of political renewals that have happened in the United States, it always was accompanied with a spiritual awakening. The First Great Awakening came right before the American Revolution, and you could trace it over and over and over again. There are spiritual awakenings that happened before major cultural and political kind of renewals and reawakenings within the United States. So we know that we need a people whose spirits are being set alight in belief and purpose, and so that's a part of what we're doing in the mentoring department, is trying to help that to be kicked off. And I think that we're doing really well. We're at right now, I think we've put close to 700 and some change people through servant leadership in the last few years that we've been teaching classes more widely. We have seen our shawl transformation program, which is we'll talk about that a little bit later, I'm sure, grow from just a few people that were involved to, I think right now we have 28 people being mentored. We have like 12 or 13 that have finished the series, and many of those, 3 or 4 of those, are actually now mentoring new people through that. So there's a reduplication that's happening in that kind of mentorship that we have going on. And our Bible studies are growing, and our prayer ministry is going strong. And so all of those things, I think, are really, God is blessing them within COS in some pretty significant ways.
Chris, I'll tell you, if you watch the news today and follow what's going on in our country today, do you really think there's a spiritual awakening going on in this country? I guess I have a bit of a question about that. Do you really think that's happening?
I think there's actually a spiritual awakening happening in the world, not just in the USA, but I think there are signs that it's even happening in the USA. If you look closely enough, it's news stories that they don't want to show you on mainstream media, but there was a spiritual revival that kicked off in a Christian university or Christian college in Kentucky, I think last
Yes,
year
I
at
did see
Asbury.
something. Yes.
And that one was quiet for the most part and long sustaining and very impactful on all those that were participating in it. There's been one that's been going on now for a few months. There's been a revival movement moving across college campuses through the South, where literally hundreds, sometimes 1,000+ students are getting baptized in big kind of
Pickup truck.
tubs. Yeah,
Yes,
inside of
I
pickup
saw
trucks. Yeah. I mean, even there's stories about huge renewals that are happening in other countries as well. France, one of the most secular countries in the world, one of the most atheist countries in the world, has been steadily having more and more baptisms every single year. And this last Easter, they had a record number of baptisms. And this is all in the Roman Catholic Church. This isn't even considering all the other denominations that are working in France, too. They had 12,000 baptisms. And these aren't babies, these are adults. And it's skewing towards the younger. Every year, it's getting younger and younger. The 18 to 25-year-old crowd are getting baptized more and more. So I think the Spirit's on the move. I think God is on the move. I think God's doing something. And yeah, if you watch the mainstream media, I don't think you see that. I don't think you hear that.
very
But
low,
if
very low,
if you
very
pay
low.
attention, I think the signs are there and God is doing something.
Good, good, good.
I think when people see how quickly and how extreme things have gotten, there's a hunger. I mean, God places that hunger in people's heart, to strive to know God. So I think at this point, when people see the extremism that's going on, it's driving people to with a hunger to know more, to learn more. So people are ripe. What they say, the harvest fields are ripe.
Yeah. Luke 10:2 says the harvest is great, the laborers are few. So pray that the Lord of the harvest will send laborers into the field. So we know that God is always working. So
Now, tell us about, talk a little bit more about the servant leadership course. Now, Ken and I have both been through servant leadership, and although it's been a couple years, we're still using. This was the book that Ken and I used in the course, and from what I understand, you've rewritten the book. So give us kind of an update on that particular course, servant leadership.
I took the course with Chris, so yeah, he's I've
Oh,
been.
you did? Okay.
yeah, and then I think you took it with Jenny, right, Dale?
Yes, I took it with Jenny. Yes.
Yeah, who all I also took it with too. So she's a great teacher of servant leadership, and she's a great servant leader. This is my copy. It is very tattered and very used, of David's book, and we use this for I think probably about 5 years in teaching servant leadership, maybe a bit more. He published it in 2016, self-published it after he had been teaching these principles at Crown Quest, which is Tim Dunn's company in Texas. And Tim Dunn hired him off of the reference from a friend who had served in the army with David and said, you gotta get this guy into our organization to teach these leadership principles. And so he did. And he used to teach it kind of in seminars. And in fact, if you dig, you can find like a 2-hour seminar of him teaching it, I think for free at some Grace Bible College or something like that, where he teaches a real kind of surface level of it, but he goes through all the principles. And based off of that PowerPoint presentation and how he taught it and everything, he wrote the book. And in fact, the pictures in here are basically just like screenshots of his PowerPoint presentation in black and white.
Oh,
And
really?
it's got a lot of kind of faux pas in it. If someone is a really a stickler for grammar and spelling and perfectness in their texts, they get bothered by this book a little bit. he's also not a writer. He's not a professional writer. And so it can take a little bit of time diving in and really trying to unpack the principles to get them to a level of depth that I think it is really important to get. And it's one of the reasons why our classes are so important. And about 2 years ago, we got to see a preview edition of the second edition that he was working on with a couple who does ministry, or they did ministry on the campus of King's College. And they together were writing an edition to get professionally published. And we were able to look at that manuscript and we loved it. It's fantastic. And if you want to dive in a little bit deeper, I highly recommend it. But it isn't really fitting for what we do and how we teach it in COS. And what we did is really develop off of this book. And in that new book, they add some chapters. They change some chapters around in some ways that don't make sense to the way that we teach the course. So we went back to David and said, hey, would you mind if we used your materials but created our own COS resource? And he actually came up with the idea of, yeah, I think it'd be phenomenal if you guys did a workbook where, like, you know, even all your reflection questions and everything were right inside of it. So Jenny and Rosalind and I started working on it. We outlined all of David's book. Then we began to take out some stuff that we thought we can streamline some things with, and we began to reorder it to make sense with how we teach it within COS, because there were some chapters that we always felt like came too late in the book and they needed to be a little earlier. So we moved some of that around. And then we worked with our amazing, we worked with an amazing ghostwriter who wrote the text for us. And then we worked with a bunch of people within our team to revise that manuscript, get it all buttoned up. And then we worked with our amazing graphics department. And this is the actual first sample printing of it. There's some mistakes even in this that we're currently working through and going to fix. But this is the new Convention of States workbook edition of servant leadership that anybody who signs up and takes servant leadership going forward, that's the book that they're going to use.
Even the pictures are color now, huh?
Yeah, the pictures are color and they're absolutely gorgeous. Like there's if you remember the Freedom V, there's our new graphic for the Freedom V, which draws you right into recognizing how the different types of leadership influence and leadership styles match into the Freedom V. And so our graphics department really just knocked it out of the park. There's some just beautiful artwork and paintings in there that really liven it up and stuff too. So,
well, Chris, let's kind of wind things up here. What's your objectives? What are you trying to what do you want to accomplish here in 2024 with the mentoring department?
Servant leadership is a core focus of ours. Some of the other stuff that we do is a little slower of a burn with the spiritual formation series. The Shawl series that we bring people through is a series of 5 guides that take you through what we call the sacred arts, and it's surrendering, humbling, abiding, waiting, and listening. And so it teaches you how to live a more practical friendship that leads to transformation in your own heart with Jesus, with God. And so that we would love to see grow and continue to grow. But that is about a year to a year and a half commitment when you sign on to it. So it's a little slower than servant leadership, which is 9 weeks. So our broader, wider focus is servant leadership. So we want to be able to continue to expand the resources that are even in this workbook. We even built some things in that we'll be able to expand some of that in later days. There's some placeholder things with some QR codes in there now, but we're going to make some more online resources for that. And we've put 700 people through, and we require you to have signed a leadership agreement in order to take servant leadership. But we have 5,700 people who have signed the leadership agreement. So it'd be really great if we got 5,000 more people through servant leadership. And it is it has a lot of principles and Judeo-Christian values and in biblical, principles, but you don't have to be a believer to take it. And in fact, we've even made the workbook more approachable for people to see that as the human wisdom that it really is, the ancient wisdom that it is, and be able to glean from that ancient wisdom how we can live in better union with each other, just like the founding fathers did as they revered Judeo-Christian values in forming our country too. So we'd love to see our servant leadership continue to grow and get more and more people through it.
All right, Chris, thank you very much for coming on and updating us on the mentoring department. I always just think of you servant leadership, but I'm going to now think of you mentoring department. So
Yeah.
thanks for coming on, Chris. Thank you very much.
Good to see you again, Chris.
Thank you guys. Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye now.
Oh, good. Well, I think he's doing a great job, Ken.
Yeah, I think as we talked about, there's so much more. I think as we talked about having him back again, I'm sure we'll be seeing more from Chris.
Yep. Well, listen, I want to jump right into our next guest here. This gentleman is a new COS volunteer, and normally we bring on experienced COS leaders, but this is a special guy. He's a brand new volunteer, and we're going to show you. We're going to talk about why he's kind of special. So let's bring on Mr. Patrick Malater. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Patrick.
Hey, Dale and Ken, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Good to meet you.
I thought we had lost you there for a minute, but you still there?
No, I'm still
Just
here.
a temporary.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good to see you, Patrick.
Well, like I said, Patrick is a new COS volunteer, and there's a couple reasons that I wanted to feature him tonight. A couple reasons specific to why he chose to get into Convention of States. But very quickly, Patrick, give us a little bit on your background. Where are you from?
Sure. Well, I am from beautiful Gary, Indiana. I grew up right by the steel mills back when Gary was the murder capital of the United States. So I grew up in the hood.
Oh, my.
I ended up going to a Catholic high school in Maryville called Andrean, where the most consequential thing in my life happened. I met this beautiful young woman named Ellen White, who I've been married to for the last 45 years.
Oh, good for you. Good for you.
So she is the greatest woman on planet Earth. And I actually say this when she's not in the room. And she is the mother of our 5 children.
5 kids. Wow.
So I went to college originally at Valpo on a full scholarship, but transferred to Indiana University, where I graduated with an accounting degree with distinction. I ended up passing the CPA exam concurrent with graduation, and ended up starting off with the largest CPA firm on planet Earth, where I made partner at age 33. And then after they sold off my business, I was the national director of tax for what is now the 7th largest accounting firm in the world. So I could have a few beers tonight and I will forget more about what is in the tax code than collectively all 535 members of Congress know.
Is that right?
So,
all right.
That's the short snippet of my life.
Okay. Good deal. Well, tell us then how you came across Convention of States.
Sure. Well, I had this really bad idea last fall that I was going to run for Congress.
Yeah.
And there were a few things that got me into that position, a few drivers, which I won't necessarily get into. But I probably spent a month prior to deciding finally to get into the race in terms of what my planks would be. What would be the tipping points? What would be the leverage points that could make meaningful change in the country? And the number one issue, the platform that I'm running on, is term limiting the Congress. Okay. Because we are all smart enough to know that nothing changes if nothing changes. And this is a position that over 80% of all people in the country believe in. 89% of Republicans, 76% of Democrats, and like 83% of independents want to see it happen. So it should be an easy thing to have happen, right?
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Patrick on,
right?
Because term limits is one of the pillars of the COS resolution, term limits on congressional leaders,
especially congressional leaders,
Supreme Court justices, and other federal officials. That takes in the administrative state. However, it takes in a lot of people, and I was very impressed that was an interest of yours. So,
well, that again, I spent a lot of time thinking about how I could affect change in a congressional position. And again, I didn't get the nomenclature right initially, but I got the action right, spot on. I did.
Okay.
So, I ended up looking at originally who was actually out there advocating for term limits, and really the only organization I could find was U.S. Term Limits.
Yeah.
And from what I could discern, they are incredibly weak. They have this thing called the Term Limits Pledge, and that's the main thing that they advocate. But that's like making the Boy Scout pledge or the Cub Scout pledge. I'm serious.
Yeah.
When I'm at debates, we have several people that talk about, oh, well, I made the U.S. term limits pledge. That's BS. It means nothing. Your organization has at least taken a handful of steps to actually make a convention of states happen. So to me, that's a key issue. And by the way, you said, well, you got 29,000 people watching. If you have me on a few more times, you'll have like 5 million viewers.
You think so?
Because of my passion and knowledge about how to affect particular change.
Tell us briefly. Briefly tell us your research and your thought process about term limits.
Sure.
What kind of term limits are you talking about with regard to
Congress? Yeah. Well, I looked what you guys came up with in your convention or whatever the heck it was. 24 years, really? that's like forever.
Yeah.
So for me, in the world according to Patrick, it needs to be an 8-year maximum term. So 4 terms in the House, or 1 term in the Senate, 1 term in the House, with no ability to lobby for a 10-year period of time. It's kind of like grade school, right? You get to 8th, you started first grade, you ended 8th grade. It's time to move on to high school. And that's how I believe it needs to be with Congress. A few of the candidates that I'm running against talk about, well, you need to have a certain amount of time to understand the legislative process. If you can't figure that out in 2 weeks, you're pretty effing stupid. You truly are.
Yeah.
You don't belong in Congress if you can't discern how the voting process and how the legislative process works.
Yeah.
Again, that's how I process things. But again, I've worked with a lot of smart people in my career, and they have to figure things out in a handful of days.
Yeah. What about are you including Supreme Court justices?
I am not, because what I'm looking at first is what are the pivot points to make change happen. If you look at what's occurring right now in Congress, and again, the way I've structured my campaign is to focus on the 80% of the people. If you look at what's happening right now, you have the outer extremes of both parties getting 80% of the attention. These are the people that you see on MSNBC, CNN, Fox, and all the standard media channels.
Right.
I want to focus on the 80% of people that agree on certain issues that want particular change. So again, we talked about earlier here tonight how over 80% of people in the country want congressional term limits, but it can't happen. Help me understand how that is. Or 80% of the people want to have a closed border, are not in favor of illegal immigration, but 80% of the same people are in favor of legal immigration. Why can't we get that passed through Congress. Well, part of let me help you understand why that is. We can't get it passed because we have factions on each side of the party that interfere in getting that accomplished. So again, to me, when I looked at my planks, what would be the most important issue to affecting change? It's congressional term limits. Now, it's possible that if we affect the kind of change that I'm talking about, that we could get, 535 bozos, but I'm willing to take that risk under the presumption that it's so screwed up right now that I'm willing to take that risk of having newer minds, different minds, younger minds to affect change.
Okay.
I agree with that, Patrick. How do you see the problem with the unelected bureaucrat that?
Well, here, this question came up a couple times, and it's a great question, Ken. If Congress is effectively doing their job, what do they have? They have the power of the purse, don't they?
Yeah.
They can determine how money is being spent. So again, if these folks are doing their job, they can say, these bazillion people that are currently in all of these different cabinet areas in the country, they can be eliminated. I want to share a quick story. I just recently finished Elon Musk's biography. And, when he took over Twitter, there's actually a couple good stories out of that. But when he took over Twitter, within a matter of months, he fired 75% of the people. Why? Because they weren't doing anything. They were just taking up space and getting lattes and whatever. We don't have the fortitude to get something like that done. However, is there equally that amount of dead wood in all these different administrative positions? No question. Yeah. But it is not going to happen unless you get different minds, better minds, younger minds. My personal concern is that, we're going to just let life take its journey here, and stuff is going to hit the fan here in, 5 years, 10 years. Again, you can't be nearly $35 trillion in debt and blowing, an extra $1 trillion a year without there being consequences.
Yeah, right.
One of the things I always talk about, my so-called entry speech when I'm doing a debate or a talk is I reflect back on the last couple of decades. And, a little over 20 years ago when President Clinton left office, our country was actually in a pretty good spot. We were at peace. People seemed to get along, and we had generated 4 consecutive years of budget surpluses. In fact, our head of the Federal Reserve at the time, Alan Greenspan, said we'd be able to pay off all of our national debt by 2006, and then we'd be able to go ahead and pre-fund Social Security to the tune of about $500 billion a year. Well, that didn't happen, did it?
Sure didn't. Well, it sure didn't.
Well, what did happen? Well, W took office in 2001, and the first thing that happened was we passed 2 massive tax cuts that largely benefited our highest income people. And I was one of them, and I was pissed. The reason I was because I could tell, since I ran a national tax practice, what was going to happen to our budget. And it made about a $650 billion change in 1 year.
Yeah.
Then we ended up going into wars in Afghanistan, Iraq. When President Obama came into office, we added a couple of new social programs like Obamacare, and then boom, COVID spending was the icing on the cake, and that's why we're 35.
It all started in the Bush. Administration.
Yeah, I mean, I at the time, I was a Democrat at the time. I didn't change parties until 2008, you know. But if you think about it, when Bush took office, he had a Republican House and a Republican Senate, and it was the first time it happened in 45 years.
Yeah.
You know, since the Eisenhower administration. So you talk about Republicans being so fiscally responsible. That's nonsense.
Mm.
So again,
All right.
I'm a CPA. You know, I'm not just just like not all people that play football make it to the NFL.
Right.
If there was a Hall of Fame for CPAs, I'd be in it. So,
well, the other thing, we got to wrap it up here.
that's too bad.
The other thing that I wanted to, the other reason I wanted to bring you on tonight was our core value of self-governance and encouraging our volunteers to get involved. And while we can't make this a political speech for you, but you are running for Congress.
Sure.
All right.
Yes.
And that's self-governance. That's what we encourage our volunteers to do.
Sure.
So if you want more information on Patrick, there's his website, patrickmforcongress.com.
Right.
And if you live in the 5th District, right?
That's correct.
You want to check out Patrick. So Patrick, yeah. I want to thank you for coming on tonight. And
so let me put out a shout out to one of your members, and that is Marty Wood.
Yeah.
Marty Wood actually connected me to your group. He was at my first debate. Yeah. He actually is an Android high school graduate as well.
Is that right? Really? Oh, okay.
He is. And he met up with my wife and said, he's running on term limits. Nobody does that. So yeah, that is my number one plank. So
good for him. Good for him. Patrick, thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. And you should have me again.
All right, Ken. Ken, I want to I want to play a video here. Gary Harbaugh, who is doing the series for us on the national debt, series called Debt Avalanche. And Gary's got another video here for us. What Gary is doing, I think, is he's educating us on, we all see these numbers and we all understand $35 trillion in debt. But what Gary is also bringing to the table is some other aspects of what we could lose if our country goes under because of this national debt. So I think Gary, this episode, he's talking about exchange rates, and that's something that I would never think about it, even talking about.
Yeah.
But Gary does a good job. So I want to play that, and then we'll come back and wrap things up. Okay.
Excellent. Yep.
Hi, it's Gary. This is the next in our series on the debt avalanche, the U.S. national debt that threatens to bury us in an unsustainable and unpayable debt. In the last video, I talked about 3 countries whose currencies were previously world reserve currencies. The key point, the Spanish dollar, the Dutch guilder, and the British pound. And the key point to understand about those things is, number one, countries gain the status of world reserve currency through military and economic power, and those status is lost typically through either the cost or actual defeat in military confrontations. So near the end of World War II, in July of 1944, an agreement was negotiated among 44 countries at a place called Bretton Woods, a resort in New Hampshire. The agreement was largely shaped by an American, Harry Dexter White, and a British economist, John Maynard Keynes. And the reason this happened then in July of 1944 is that the D-Day invasion in June of 1944 had proven to be successful. And so it was undoubted that the Allies were going to win. It was just a matter of time. And the purpose was to negotiate a new economic world order. And one of the agreements that came out of that was something called fixed exchange rates, whereby every other country's currency would be fixed in its exchange rate with the United States dollar. Eliminated a problem of countries competitively devaluing their currencies against each other, which is one of the things that caused rivalries and was viewed as a cause of previous wars. So the idea was if we have fixed exchange rates, we will not have this basis for war in the future. And also, the United States dollar was set at a fixed exchange rate with other currencies, and that we would trade US dollars that other countries gained through trade. We would exchange them for gold at $35 an ounce. So the dollar was as good as gold, can be converted to gold, and we had most of the world's gold at that time. And the reason is because during the war, our manufacturing and agricultural capacity became very apparent. We were a strong economic power, and we sold our military and munitions and food to other countries in exchange for gold. So we had much of the world's gold. We had the economic power. Other countries, their manufacturing capacity and their cities were largely bombed to bits. All that had to be rebuilt. We didn't have that need in the United States because we had not been invaded or bombed. And so the United States was clearly the world's dominant economic power. The Bretton Woods Agreement cemented that status. Following that agreement, another outcome of that agreement was the creation of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. If you go to their websites, they're noble sounding goals. World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are instruments of centralized economic control. And that control is centered in Washington, D.C., where the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund have their headquarters. So these two things, the fixed exchange rates and the IMF and the World Bank, came out of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And these things were a great benefit to world trade, and they lasted for about 25 years following the Second World War. But ultimately, the Bretton Woods Agreement collapsed. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how and why that took place and what followed it. And in the next in our series on the debt avalanche, I will talk about that.
Okay, well, did you catch all that, Ken?
Yeah, I was taking notes.
Did you? Okay, all
Took
right.
some good notes. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad Gary's doing that because, again, these are things that I would have never thought about. I didn't know anything about. So
A lot of intricacies in there. Yep.
well, let's start wrapping things up. Our next broadcast is going to be May 6th. We're just getting into the month of May already, Ken. This year's flying by.
I tell you. Yep. It really is.
We're going to have another COS gentleman on by the name of Bud Cornwell. He's also known as Gunny.
Yep.
And Bud's involved in COS in a lot of different ways, I think. But he's also got a podcast called The Patriot Cause. And so we'll get to talk to him about the podcast and talk to him about. I understand he's in this involved in this ham radio.
There you go. Another link to the ham radio area there. Yeah, I think he'll be an interesting segment to have on COS. Yep.
And this ham radio group that's being formed in COS, we're gonna have one of the originators on in May as a guest, and that happens to be our state director, Dale Timpson.
He's taking a deep dive into that right off the bat, which is good.
Yeah.
So
we're going to have him on in May. I think it's May 6th or the 13th. I can't remember. Well, it must be the 13th.
Somewhere in May, yeah.
Somewhere in there. But anyway, that's what's coming up on May 6th. And then just to let everyone know, as far as the roundtable is concerned for May, that would be on the 27th of May, but being Memorial Day, we're going to be doing a best of that evening. So I want to tune in for, be hard to pick what a best of would be for that, but we'll have to pick one out. Don't know what it'll be right now, but
might have to run one of the famous races of the day.
Yeah. Ken, I want to very quickly.
Yep.
Have we got both of these podcasts posted now?
Yes. Most of them have been published, so you can get them both. Number 12.
Okay, so these are both available. Episode number 12, Christy Stutzman, Marlon Stutzman's wife, and episode 13, Vicki Mooring, one of our region captains. So those are available on Spotify.com. Those are podcasts that are now available. So, Ken, that is a wrap for this evening. And we will head to closing out this evening with our Mark Meckler video that we like to use. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in tonight. I hope you enjoyed this evening's broadcast. We enjoyed doing it, obviously. And
everybody will enjoy that.
Yep. And we will look forward to seeing everyone on May 6th. So everyone, have a good evening. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
I struggle to empathize with people who would give up. It doesn't make sense to me. Sam Adams said, for those of you who prefer safety and security over liberty, over the animating fight for liberty, I hope that you enjoy licking the hands that feed you. May your chains rest lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. Like, do you understand that your kids and you are sentencing your kids and your grandkids and your friends' kids and your neighbors' kids to a lifetime of slavery and servitude, literally, of fear, of living in the darkness? But never, ever, never, never, never give up. George Washington lost the majority of his battles that he fought in the American Revolution. If you read his writings, if you read the letters where he was writing to Congress asking for money and troops, he was saying, we're losing. I don't have the troops I need. I don't have the supplies I need. Did he quit? What about the guys on the beach at Normandy? Like, what did they do? Did they just quit? Oh, there's, a lot of guys are dying around me. It's really bad. It looks really dismal. Those cliffs are huge. Machine gun fire raining down on us. And it's too hard. We should just quit. Thank God those people didn't quit. If they had, where would we be? I get discouraged for sure. And I will quit fighting at some point. And that point is when the first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box 6 feet down.